Welcome, friends. You're watching The Last Hike. Today's stories are about Karens who entered the Grand Canyon with plenty of confidence and no intention of listening to warnings. From a woman who turned down water in extreme heat, to a woman who trusted an app over the people trying to help her, only to discover that the route she was following didn't actually exist. It was July 14th, 2015. The Bright Angel Trail at Grand Canyon National Park dropped nearly 5,000 feet from the south rim to the canyon floor. The walls on either side trapped heat like an oven, radiating it back at ground level long after the sun had already done its work. By 9 in the morning, the trailhead was sitting at 91 degrees Fahrenheit. By noon, the inner canyon would hit 113. Laura Gail Thurston was 44 years old and worked as a project manager in a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. She was a confident person who trusted her own judgment and wasn't particularly inclined to second-guess herself. For months, she had been planning a trip to the Grand Canyon and felt she had done everything necessary to prepare. She went to the gym twice a week, took long walks every Sunday, and spent weeks breaking in a new pair of trail shoes around her neighborhood. By the time she arrived, she was convinced she was ready. She made the trip alone. Looking at her, it's easy to see why she felt prepared. The problem was that she never realized that there was a difference between being prepared for a hike and being prepared for this hike. She filled a single 16-ounce water bottle at the trailhead and started her descent at 8:50 in the morning. Right there at the kiosk, a sign read, "Carry at least 1 liter of water per hour. Do not hike to the river and back in one day." She stopped, read it, took a photo of it, and kept walking. Not in a rush, just decided it did not apply to her. At the rest stop, a water station was clearly marked and free to use. A couple resting there pointed it out to her. She told them she was fine, not really thirsty yet, and kept moving. She finished her water somewhere along the next stretch of trail. By the time she reached the rest stop at about 1.5 miles down, she had been hiking for nearly 2 hours in rising heat with nothing left to drink. A volunteer trail ambassador offered to refill her bottle. Laura let him fill it halfway before stopping him, saying she wasn't planning to stay out much longer. When he warned her about the heat farther down the trail, she brushed it off as a simple day hike. After a short rest, she continued deeper into the canyon. Then she stood up and kept going down. Past the rest house, the trail drops into the inner canyon, where the walls close in and the heat has nowhere to escape. There were no more water stations beyond that point, no shade to speak of, and no staffed posts. The temperature in that section of the canyon was around 109 degrees and still climbing. By then, she had been without water for close to 90 minutes. A pair of hikers heading up the trail passed her near the 2.5-mile marker below the rest house. They noticed that she was moving slowly and stopping every few minutes to press her hand flat against the canyon wall. Something about the way she looked caught their attention. Despite the extreme heat, her skin appeared unusually dry. One of the hikers asked if she was okay, but she waved him off without looking up and continued on her way. That's not just stubbornness, that's someone who genuinely believed that she had it under control when every single thing around her was saying complete otherwise. When your body stops sweating in that kind of heat, it does not mean you have adjusted. It means your cooling system has shut down and your core temperature is already climbing past the point of no return. Laura almost certainly did not know that, but that is exactly what was happening while she was still walking. About 20 minutes later, a group of 4 hikers heading down the trail found her sitting against the canyon wall with her legs out and her head tilted back. She was conscious, but unable to respond. Her breathing was rapid, and her skin was hot and completely dry. One hiker stayed with her while another checked her bag. Inside were sunscreen, a paper map, a phone with a dead battery, and an empty water bottle. There was no food or electrolyte replacement. With no signal available, one member of the group headed back toward the rest house for help. Laura lost consciousness before he returned. The report reached emergency services through a radio relay at around 1:45 that afternoon. A helicopter was dispatched, but strong winds delayed the approach. Ground rescuers arrived roughly 80 minutes after the first call and found no pulse. Resuscitation efforts continued during the airlift, but she was pronounced dead at a regional medical facility. Laura's body was recovered 2.5 miles below the rest stop near the 3-mile mark. The coroner determined the cause of death was hypovolemic shock from severe dehydration, with hyperthermia as a contributing factor. Her core temperature at rescue was 106.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The trail ambassador's log documented his warning about conditions farther down the trail and her decision to continue with only a partially filled bottle. Witness statements from the couple at the earlier rest stop and the group of 4 supported the timeline. The case was ruled accidental. A 16-ounce bottle and a photo of a warning sign was apparently all the preparation Laura thought she needed. Not far away, a woman who grew up in the desert convinced herself that was enough of an advantage to hike to the Colorado River and back in a single day. It was August 3rd, 2017. The South Kaibab Trail dropped 7 miles from the south rim to the Colorado River, losing nearly 5,000 feet along an open ridgeline with no shade and no water for its entire length. At 6 in the morning, the rim was 78 degrees Fahrenheit. By early afternoon, the canyon floor would hit 116. Rosie Ormond was 47 years old and sold real estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. She had spent her entire adult life in the desert, and that fact mattered to her more than it should have. Phoenix summers hit 110 degrees regularly, and she had always been fine. What she did not account for was that canyon heat and city heat are two entirely different things, and the South Kaibab Trail does not care what you think you are used to.
She thought she understood heat because she'd lived with it for years. The canyon was about to show her the real difference.
She started her descent at 6:40 in the morning with two 16-ounce water bottles and a bag of trail mix in a small shoulder bag. At Cedar Ridge, about a mile and a half down, a sign warned hikers not to continue toward the river without at least 4 liters of water and a turnaround plan before 10 in the morning. 2 hikers resting there pointed it out to her. She told them the morning felt fine and that she had been dealing with desert heat her whole life. She was walking again before they finished responding. Below Cedar Ridge, the trail narrows along an exposed ridgeline with the canyon dropping away on both sides. Rosie moved through that section steadily, finishing both water bottles before reaching the tip-off at roughly 4.5 miles in. No shade, no water source, temperature already at 97 degrees. She kept going. She reached the river just before 11 in the morning after more than 4 hours of hiking. The canyon floor was sitting at 108 degrees. She had been without water for the last 2 miles of descent, and it showed. She was moving stiffly when the backpackers first saw her, her face deeply flushed, and she sat down heavily at the water's edge without saying anything to anyone. One of the backpackers brought her a full water bottle and an electrolyte packet without being asked. She drank most of the water and handed the packet back. He told her she needed it in that heat. She said she did not do supplements and that she didn't believe in that stuff. She rested for about 30 minutes, finished the water, and stood up to leave. The same backpacker told her the temperature was still climbing and offered 2 more bottles for the climb back up. She took 1 bottle and told him she'd be fine with that, said she had a long drive back to Scottsdale and needed to get going.
What's me is that she still seemed to think that this was something she could simply push through. The people around her saw the warning signs, but Rosie seemed more focused on just getting back to Scottsdale that night instead.
The backpackers watched her start up the trail. She stopped 4 times in the first quarter mile, hands on her knees, before disappearing around a bend. 2 of them considered going after her, but they were carrying full packs and had their own miles ahead. They noted the time and hoped she would be okay.
The climb back gains 5,000 feet over 7 miles of fully exposed trail in 108-degree heat after 4 hours of descent with 1 borrowed bottle and no electrolytes. The body is already behind before the first step upward.
40 minutes into her climb, a solo hiker coming down found her sitting on the trail, head drooping forward. He spoke to her and she looked up but could not form words. Her skin was hot and dry, her breathing fast and audible. He gave her the rest of his water, sat down next to her, and kept talking to keep her present. She responded a few times in single words and then stopped responding altogether. He sent a distress signal on his satellite communicator at 12:17 in the afternoon. She lost consciousness shortly after. A second hiker reached them within minutes, and the 2 alternated chest compressions for close to 15 minutes before ground personnel arrived from a camp roughly a mile away. No defibrillator was available. Ground personnel took over resuscitation on site. A helicopter was delayed by a narrow approach corridor and high crosswinds in that section of the canyon. She was airlifted once a stable approach was possible and pronounced dead at a medical facility. The coroner listed cause of death as cardiac arrest from exertional heat stroke. Her core temperature at rescue was 107.2 degrees Fahrenheit. No conditions were found that would have caused cardiac arrest independently. The backpackers provided written accounts covering her arrival, her condition at the river, and the exchange over the electrolytes and the second water bottle. The satellite communicator log confirmed the distress signal timestamp. Both of her original water bottles were recovered empty at the riverbank. The case was ruled accidental. The South Kaibab took Rosie because she trusted the wrong thing about herself. On the Hermit Trail that same season, a woman with 2 previous canyon hikes under her belt treated that history like a guarantee. It was June 22nd, 2016. The South Kaibab Trail carved along an exposed ridgeline from the south rim all the way down to the Colorado River. 7 miles of open sun with no water and no shade at any point. By 8 in the morning, the rim was already at 84 degrees Fahrenheit. The inner canyon was forecast to hit 111 by early afternoon. Trinity Bivens was 38 years old and worked in marketing in Los Angeles. She was in the middle of a solo Southwest road trip, hitting national parks back to back, posting as she went. The Grand Canyon was a scheduled stop, one day, maybe two. She had no prior canyon hiking experience, but she was fit, she was confident, and she had done enough urban hiking around Griffith Park to feel like she understood trails. The night before she hiked, she bought a small designer day pack from a gift shop near her hotel, packed it with her phone, sunglasses, a thin cardigan, and a single 20-ounce water bottle, and set an early alarm. She showed up at the trailhead the next morning like she was heading to a workout class. At the trailhead, a large sign warned hikers not to continue without enough water and to turn around if unprepared. Trinity glanced at it briefly, then stepped to the side to take a photo of the canyon and continued down the trail. About a mile in, a woman who had already come back up stopped and told Trinity it was getting too hot to continue. Trinity was busy lining up a photo on her phone. She gave a quick acknowledgement, waited for the woman to move out of the frame, and went back to taking pictures. Then she kept walking.
Looking back, it feels like Trinity spent far more time thinking about the canyon as a backdrop than as an environment that she actually had to deal with.
At Cedar Ridge, a volunteer trail worker noticed that her only water bottle was already more than half empty. He told her directly that continuing without more water in those conditions was dangerous. Trinity barely looked up from her phone, said she just wanted to get a few better shots, and asked which overlook had the best view. When he advised her to turn around, she continued down the trail anyway. He logged the interaction, including the time, her water supply, and her refusal to follow the warning. By the time Trinity reached Skeleton Point around 10:40 that morning, her water bottle was empty. She had spent more than 2 hours in direct sun and still had 3,000 feet of climbing ahead of her. A pair of hikers noticed she looked flushed and asked if she was heading back. She said yes and kept moving. Somewhere near Skeleton Point, she finally turned around and started the climb out. The climb back to the rim from that point is 3 miles of continuous ascent along a fully exposed ridgeline that gains roughly 3,000 feet. There is no shade, no water, and very little relief anywhere on the route. Descending it in the cooler hours of the morning is challenging enough. Climbing it back toward the rim near midday, dehydrated and already overheated, is a completely different experience. Within the first half mile of the ascent, Trinity's pace had slowed to a near crawl. The trail surface sat in direct sunlight and radiated heat upward, meaning her body was absorbing it from above and below at the same time. She had already spent more than 2 hours in extreme heat without replacing the water she had lost, and the physical effort of the climb pushed her body beyond what it could handle. About 45 minutes into the ascent, a group of 3 hikers rounded a bend and found her sitting on the trail with her knees drawn up and her head lowered. She did not respond when they called out to her. When one of them touched her arm, her skin felt hot and completely dry. Her breathing was fast, shallow, and loud enough to be heard from several feet away.
By this point, nothing about what was happening felt surprising anymore. Every warning had been ignored, and the canyon was simply following through.
One hiker poured water over her neck and wrists. Another tried to get a verbal response. She opened her eyes briefly but could not speak. The third went through her bag. Phone, sunglasses, cardigan, lip balm. No food, no electrolytes, nothing useful. The empty 20-ounce bottle was at the bottom of the pack. One of them had cell signal at that elevation and called emergency services at 11:32 in the morning. A helicopter reached the area at around 12:10 in the afternoon. The exposed ridgeline allowed a direct approach. She was airlifted from the trail, and resuscitation was performed during transport. She was pronounced dead at a medical facility at 12:51 in the afternoon. The coroner listed cause of death as heat stroke with cardiovascular collapse. Her core temperature at airlift was 108 degrees Fahrenheit. No water remained in her pack. The trail worker's log provided a precise timestamp and a record of their exchange at Cedar Ridge. The descending hikers gave formal statements. The case was ruled accidental, with contributing factors including inadequate water, continuation past multiple advised turnaround points, and ascent during peak heat on a fully exposed trail with no shade or water at any point. The Grand Canyon has a way of meeting people exactly where their confidence ends. On the Hermit Trail the following summer, a woman with 2 previous canyon hikes decided that was enough to go deeper into one of the most remote corridors in the park alone. It was August 9th, 2014. The Hermit Trail dropped 9 miles from the South Rim to the Colorado River through remote, rugged terrain with no staffed stations, no reliable water sources, and no regular patrols. By 9 that morning, the temperature at the rim had already reached 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Wilma Lynn Duthie was 55 years old and had recently retired after a long career in school administration in Tucson, Arizona. For decades, she had been the person responsible for keeping things organized, solving problems, and making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. That kind of responsibility can build confidence, and Wilma had plenty of it. She had hiked the Grand Canyon twice before on one of the main corridor trails, reaching the 3-mile rest area and returning without any trouble. When she came across the Hermit Trail, she saw it as the logical next step. After 2 successful canyon hikes, a more challenging route probably didn't seem like a dramatic leap. She arrived at the trailhead at 7:30 that morning. Within the first hour, she passed 2 hikers heading back up. One warned her that conditions lower in the canyon were worse than expected. Wilma seemed to file the information away and immediately ignored it. By the time she reached a drainage area deeper in the canyon, around 10:30, nearly 2 of her 3 liters of water were gone. She stopped to eat a granola bar and looked at what remained. Wilma decided she could make it work and continued deeper into the canyon.
I mean, you wouldn't survive without water, so what's the plan here exactly? Because from that point on, she was basically betting the rest of the hike on a few mouthfuls of water and a whole lot of optimism.
A natural spring sat along the trail not far ahead, the only reliable water source on the upper section of the Hermit. A small handwritten note left by a previous hiker was wedged into a crack in the rock near it, warning that the water needed to be filtered before drinking. Wilma did not carry a filter because she had not planned to go far enough to need one. She looked at the spring, looked at the note, and kept walking. She reached a point roughly 5 miles from the rim at around noon. The temperature was 102 degrees Fahrenheit. She had less than half a liter left. She found a strip of shade under a rock overhang and sat down. She stayed there for about 40 minutes, rationing the last of her water in small sips. At some point during that rest, she decided to turn around. Not because she felt she had made a mistake, because she had seen enough. She began her return ascent at around 12:40 in the afternoon, 5 miles back to the rim, gaining 3,000 feet, on an eroded trail that was hard to follow even under good conditions. 105 degrees on the exposed sections, nothing left to drink. The Hermit Trail in its upper section is not just steep, it is technically demanding in a way that the main corridor trails are not. Loose rock, sections where the path disappears into scree, route finding that requires real attention. Under severe dehydration and heat stress, that kind of focus is the first thing to go. The evidence recovered later helped investigators piece together her final 2 hours on the trail. Her footprints in the loose dirt became increasingly erratic, with wandering steps and long pauses in exposed sections where there was no shade or obvious reason to stop. At one point, her tracks drifted roughly 30 feet off the main trail before returning. Her hat was found sitting on a rock about 2 miles into the ascent, placed there deliberately as though she had set it down and forgotten it. About a mile farther on, she was found face down on a steep section of trail. The position of her body and the disturbed rock around her suggested she had been crouching before she fell. The Hermit Trail is one of the least traveled routes in the park during August, and investigators found little evidence of contact with other hikers during her final hours. Her phone still had signal in that section of the canyon. There were no calls, messages, or attempts to contact anyone afterward. When she failed to return to her vehicle that evening, her sister contacted the park the following morning. A search began at first light, and a team covering the Hermit Trail located her body at approximately 7:20 on August 10th.
Based on environmental conditions and the condition of her body, investigators estimated that she had been dead for between 12 and 16 hours.
The coroner determined the cause of death was heat stroke, complicated by severe dehydration during the ascent. Both water bottles were empty. The second granola bar remained untouched in her bag. GPS data from her phone placed her final position roughly 4 miles from the rim. The footprint pattern, abandoned hat, and time-stamped photograph were all included in the official findings. The case was ruled accidental, with contributing factors including failure to ration water during the descent, the absence of filtration equipment on a trail with no maintained water sources, and beginning the return climb during the hottest part of the day on a remote route with limited access to assistance. Experience without judgment is just confidence with a longer leash. This last one is a little different. The information this woman had was wrong from the start, and by the time she figured that out, she was already trapped. It was September 18th, 2013. The canyon floor was still reaching the mid-90s during the day, but nighttime temperatures near the south rim had fallen into the low 40s. In the narrow side canyons, cold air settled and lingered overnight. Without the right gear, staying warm could become a serious problem very quickly. Portia Graybell was 48 years old and worked as a logistics coordinator in Denver, Colorado. She had used map applications to navigate everywhere for years and trusted them completely. She downloaded a hiking app 2 days before the trip, had no backcountry hiking experience, and no wilderness navigation training. She packed a hydration pack with 2 liters of water, a protein bar, a light zip-up jacket, and nothing else. She checked into her lodging the night before, told the front desk she was planning to do a morning hike, and left it at that.
The entire hike was built around a single assumption, that the app was right. I just don't see much evidence that Portia ever seriously questioned it or even had a backup plan if it turned out to be wrong.
She started on the Bright Angel Trail at 8 that morning, intending to reach the rest stop at the 3-mile mark and return. About a mile and a half in, she noticed a narrow drainage canyon branching off to the west. There was no sign or marked trail and no obvious path. Her hiking app, however, showed what looked like a route cutting through the drainage and reconnecting with the main trail farther down. Another hiker told her it was not a real trail. Portia pointed at the app, said it was showing one, and headed into the drainage anyway. She entered the side canyon at around 9:10 in the morning. The terrain inside was immediately more difficult than it appeared from the trail. Loose rock, dry sand, walls that narrowed within the first quarter mile. The route her app showed did not correspond to anything on the ground. She kept moving, assuming the terrain would open up ahead. About 40 minutes in the canyon, narrowed to a point where continuing required climbing down a dry fall, a vertical rock drop of roughly 12 feet. She looked at it, checked her app one more time, and climbed down. Below the dry fall, the walls rose steeply on both sides. She could not climb back up without assistance. She checked her app again. The suggested route still showed her on a path. She kept going. By 11 in the morning, she had been moving through the drainage for nearly 2 hours. The physical exertion of navigating loose terrain in rising heat had already taken a significant toll. She finished both liters of water at around 11:40. She attempted to retrace her steps, but the canyon had branched in 2 places and she had taken a wrong turn on her return. By early afternoon, she was moving through a section she had not previously entered. Her app had no signal inside the narrow walls. The route remained on the map, but nothing around her matched what it was showing. She sat down in a shaded section of the canyon floor at around 2 in the afternoon. The temperature around her was 91 degrees, but dropping as the walls blocked the sun completely. She was severely dehydrated, nauseated, and her legs had started cramping. She ate the protein bar.
For all the confidence she placed in the app, it ended up being the first thing to disappear when she actually needed it. After that, she was left with nothing but the consequences of trusting it.
As the afternoon became evening, the temperature dropped sharply. By 7, it was 53 degrees Fahrenheit in the drainage. By 10, it had fallen to 41. Portia had a light zip-up jacket and nothing else. Her body was already significantly weakened by dehydration and heat exhaustion, which meant her ability to generate and retain heat as the temperature dropped was already compromised before the cold even set in. Hypothermia in that context does not announce itself the way people expect it to. The body just gets quieter and quieter until it stops. Portia had not specified which trail she was taking when she checked in. Her vehicle was noted in the trailhead parking area the following morning by a maintenance worker who had seen it there the previous day. A report was filed and a search was initiated covering the Bright Angel Trail and the immediate surrounding area. The side canyon she had entered was not identified as a search zone until a drainage survey was conducted on the second day. On the morning of September 20th, a search team located her body approximately 1 mile into the side canyon below the dry fall. She had been dead for an estimated 30 to 36 hours. She was found seated against the canyon wall, jacket zipped, knees drawn to her chest. The protein bar wrapper was beside her. Both water compartments were empty. Her phone was recovered and partially restored. GPS logs showed her departure point from the main trail and a fragmented track through the drainage before signal was lost. The hiking app was identified as a consumer product, with no verified backcountry data for that section of the canyon. The route it had suggested did not correspond to any navigable terrain. The statement from the hiker who told her there was no trail in the drainage became the last confirmed account of anyone speaking with Portia before she left the main trail. Authorities determined that she died after becoming lost off the main trail, with no evidence of any other contributing factors.